What a crazy group of people. What's that? Yeah, isn't that amazing? I didn't see me there either. Oh my gosh. So if you like doing that kind of stuff, there's always next year. I'm sure they're going to do it again and have a lot of fun. So these two guys were at work and they were talking, and one guy looks at the other guy and he says, man, he goes, my wife and I got into a knockdown, drag-out fight over this weekend. The other guy said, really? He goes, what happened? And he goes, well, I wanted to watch the game and she wanted to watch a movie. And the guy said, so how was the movie? So, yeah, smart man. These two ladies are talking, and one is so excited because she's engaged, she's going to get married, and she's just so excited. And the other gal looks at her and she goes, oh, honey, let me just tell you right now, the 7 first years, they're the toughest. And she goes, how long have you been married? She goes, 7 years. So we're going to start a series today on marriage, and I'm so excited about that. And I thought we would just start it off with a little video clip. So here we go.
We're brought here today by the love that Sarah and Davis have for each other.
I can't believe I get to marry him. We're perfectly compatible in every way.
Yeah, she just gets me, man.
Someone to talk to all night long.
Someone to talk to all night long.
Early morning jogs.
Sleeping in late.
We'll spend the holidays with my parents.
We'll spend the holidays with my parents.
We'll have one well-behaved daughter.
We'll have 4 or 5 little dudes running around.
He'll help me pay off my debt.
I should probably tell her about all my debt. Is that important? We'll share a bank account.
Obviously, we're gonna share a Facebook account.
Do I need to friend my in-laws?
Someone to do my laundry.
Someone to do my laundry.
Double income.
Stay-at-home dad.
Meal planning, of course.
Takeout.
The city.
The burbs.
Mission trip.
Ski trip.
Blue.
Red.
Cat.
Dog.
Fries.
Rings.
Potato.
Potato.
Minivan.
Motorcycle.
2 words. Finished basement.
2 words. Man cave.
He's so smart.
Do you think that birds wish that they had hands?
We're going to be so happy.
We'll be so happy. I'm gonna crush it at being a husband.
A question about, like, what were your thoughts when you were at the altar? What were some of the thoughts going through your mind? Right when you're, actually, let's do that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Anybody want to venture out into that? Anybody got any thoughts of what you were thinking right when you were at the altar? Carrie. He showed up. He actually showed up. That's awesome. Anyone else who's going to be brave? Anyone else? Yeah. Jay.
I had beans for breakfast and they were kicking in.
If you didn't hear that, he said he had beans for breakfast and they were starting to activate. Well, some weddings really do good with music in them. That's awesome. Steve. With the love of his life forever. That is so awesome. That is so awesome. One more. Anybody else? One more. Yeah.
When my former husband and I was standing at the altar, we kept on looking at each other. We weren't even listening to Pastor Garris. We were just saying, I love you.
Oh, that's so nice. They weren't even thinking about the words that the minister is saying, which is usually true every Sunday. But that's wonderful. That's so funny. I'm not going to share what my thoughts were because Darlene will kill me. And this is a marriage seminar. And so we're really getting into it. So this is going to be a 4-part series. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. And I want you to know, first of all, you guys, I want you to know that when we sent out an email saying that we were going to do a 4-part series on marriage seminar, I want you to know that all the women immediately, they're like, oh, this is so awesome, it's so fun. And then ladies, I want you to know that most of the guys were like, oh my God, really, do we have to do this? And so, yes, we do, and it's going to be good for everybody, and we are going to have a lot of fun. So sometimes, men think of relationships as they do their car, and that is that they don't want to have to work on it, they just want it to work. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like, guys don't want to have to work on marriage, they just want it to work all the time. But, a lot of times women want to talk about the relationship. They want to talk about their marriage and how things are going. And unfortunately, ladies, you need to understand something, that when guys hear, let's talk about our relationship, what they hear is, there's a problem, it's you, and I know how to fix it. I know how to fix the problem. And we hear, you know how to fix us. And when we hear we need to be fixed, we think of when our pets got sent to the vets to get fixed. And it wasn't a good thing, right? It's not a good situation. And so, right off the bat, things get a little dicey there, and we get a little concerned about that. And so guys think, well, do we have to talk about it? Yes, we actually do have to talk about it. Sometimes we think, if it's not broken, why mess around with it? But we still need to talk about it. So, even though this is like marriage, I want you to know that what we're going to be talking about really works in relationships, period. So it might be with siblings, it might be with children and parents and children, it might be with coworkers. I mean, the principles are principles. And we're talking about marriage, but really, if you're here and you're single, or maybe you've been separated or divorced, and and you're like, well, that doesn't apply to me, or maybe you're a widower, and yes, it does, because they're principles that apply to any and every relationship. So you can definitely walk away with a lot of good understanding and a lot of good illustrations. So it will apply. So I wanted to just kind of start off by talking about that all of us enter into a relationship with an imaginary box. And I got this box up front, and you can see that this box represents all of our hopes, dreams, and desires. So we come into the relationship with this imaginary box, with this invisible box that every one of us has, and it has in it all of our hopes and all of our dreams and all of our desires. And it's really important for us, each and individually, to really know like what's inside of our box, to really identify really what are my hopes in life, what are my dreams in life, what are my desires in life. It's important that we can articulate them. At some point in time in a relationship, we start sharing those things, right? We start sharing, what are my hopes, what are your hopes, what are my dreams, what are your dreams, what are my desires, what are your desires. And so we kind of live out of this. And so some of the things that are in our box, and this is really unique to each and every one of us. I mean, there's probably things that are unique in your box versus somebody else's box, but there are some things that are pretty much common that everybody thinks about. And so one of them is fat stacks. Right? Money. Money makes the world go round. And so what do we do about money? What are my hopes? What are my dreams? What are my desires involving money? When we talk about a marriage relationship, we're talking about, are we going to have double income, single income? Are we going to budget, or are we just going to fly by the seat of our pants? Is there debt that needs to be talked about and resolved somehow? How are we going to talk about money, and how does it apply to us? Are we going to have joint accounts, separate accounts? All of these things, talk about money. And listen, I might also add that money is one of the number 5 reasons why people get separated. There's 5 major reasons why people dissolve relationships, and money is one of the big ones, one of the 5 big problems on what happens when people dissolve a relationship. Another one is, as we move into a relationship, and again, especially marriage, is chores. Right? There's a lot that goes on in life. So who's going to do what? Right? Who's going to sew? Who's going to cook? Who's going to clean? Who's going to, keep the yard looking nice? Who's going to fix things? And yeah, hands are going up when I said the yard's looking nice, because Keith mows our lawns here and he keeps things really looking nice. But so chores, there's a lot of chores, and these are dreams and hopes and desires that we have. Like, I want the house to look nice. I want the car to look nice. Who's going to clean the car? Things like that. Listen, I found sometimes I've gotten in people's car and they say, wait a minute, because they have to take all the stuff that's in the front seat, throw it in the back seat, and cluttered car, clutter mind, right? Cluttered house, yard, cluttered mind. So declutter, it's always a good thing. And so who's going to do chores? That's so important. Another thing is our home. where do we want to live? What are our dreams? What are our hopes? The one party might say, just something quaint, 6 bedrooms, 3 baths, 3-car garage, just something affordable. The other person might be thinking, we're just going to rent an apartment. That's what we're going to do. And so, again, what are your hopes? What are your dreams? Where are you going to live? What do you want your home to look like? And are there opposite spectrums that are going on here? Because these are our hopes, these are our dreams, these are desires, and so it's important to know, what our future. I love this because it's a log cabin, and I think I would do well living in a log cabin. I would like that a lot. So, and then another dream we have, is, what kind of vehicle are we going to drive? And, and so one might be thinking, minivan, because we're going to have kids, and you can't have kids without a minivan. And the other person's probably thinking, I've always had a truck. I can't live life without a truck. There's one thing about trucks is after you've owned one, you've always got to have one after that. You just got to have a truck. And, they're great vehicles, but if it's a single cab and you're going to have kids, that becomes problematic because they don't let you put them in the back anymore. It's against the law. When we were, how many of you remember the day that you could ride in the back of a pickup truck? Yeah, so this is the first service. Second service, it'll be a lot less hands going up. And they're like, oh, you would do that. It's amazing we survived, right? We didn't wear helmets when we rode our bicycles. We jumped our bicycles over garbage cans and over all kinds of things. We didn't have seatbelts back then, if you can imagine that. My safety protection was on how fast my mom's reflexes were, right? Because it was like, oh, And a lot of times I didn't even know what was happening because it went right over my face, just like. And obviously something scary was happening, but I never knew what that was all about. So, so what that's going to be all about. And then, of course, this is so important. Are we going to have kids? Are we going to have children? It's like, so that's a hope, that's a dream, that's an expectation, because we definitely we're going to have a little girl, and then we might want 2, and so and then we have another little girl, but then we're going to want a boy, and so the next thing we just start having more children. There's dreams, expectations, desires going on with that, and so how many kids, right? How many kids are we going to have, and how does that all work out? How are we going to be able to afford all of that? It's so much fun. And then this is really, really important, is time. How are we going to spend time? This can become really a lot of conflict, especially is one an early riser and one a late riser? Is one a morning person and one a night person? Some people, they're not morning people. You know what I mean? Like they wake up, but they're really not awake until they've had their first gallon of coffee, and it's around 11 o'clock in the late morning. That's just them. But they'll stay up till midnight because they're like, and the other person could just be opposite. So how are we going to spend time? Not only how we, early riser, late riser, but how are we going to spend time in the relationship? Like who, when, where, this kind of stuff. And how much time do we spend with us versus how much time do we spend with friends? Because that becomes an issue in a relationship. One person might be thinking, I just want all the time for us, and the other person's thinking, hey, we're going to hang out with all our friends all the time. Well, my friends, your friends are kind of like, but we'll hang out with our friends and stuff. So this becomes an issue of hopes, dreams, and desires, and what's going to happen with all those hopes, dreams, and desire. And then we have, and this is a great one, then we have the calendar. What is the year going to look like? Who does what when? And so I remember when Darlene and I were engaged and we were getting married, and, she said, listen, there's 11 holidays a year that are recognized. My family will only get 3. You can have all the rest. And I'm like, that's cool. She goes, yeah, we get Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving. And so I was like, oh, we get Halloween and Groundhog's Day. No, I'm just kidding. We did really well, and we were fortunate that our families lived close to us, so sometimes we could actually even do both on the same holiday. But this becomes, a conflict. Hopes, dreams, and desires is like, well, I dream this is going to happen, and this is how we're going to manage our time, and this is how we're going to do holidays, and all of that kind of stuff. So, and then you get vacations. And you talk about, like, what are you going to do with your vacations? Are you going to travel? One person might say, oh, I would love to see Italy and Rome, and I'd love to see Spain and Germany. And the other person says, well, I'll be right here when you get back because, I don't like traveling at all. And so, again, hopes, dreams, and desires. What are you going to do with that? And, oh, boy. And then... And then there's something that every husband wants his wife to sleep in. Right? So you get the idea, right? Ladies, guys are sight-oriented. Like your emotions and connected and relationship and connected and warmth and connected. And guys are just like clueless until something is seen. And then they're like, ping, the switch is flipped and that's it. So we talk about romance and stuff. It's funny because years ago, there was a couple in the church and... he didn't come that often, but she was very, very faithful. And this is many, like 20 years ago. And they were having problems in the relationship. And then she discovered a secret that Victoria had. And she was like, holy smokes, Pastor, he can't keep his hands off of me. And I was like, well, guys are sight-oriented. So anyways, so that's that. And then you get, and this is the only thing I could find to really represent this, but it's like, how are you going to treat each other in a relationship? So I got honey because my honey's so sweet. And So how are you going to treat each other? Are you going to be critical? Are you going to be sarcastic? Are you going to be kind? Are you going to be complimentary towards one another? Civil towards one another? How is that relationship actually even going to look like just in your treating of one another? And what does that look like? And then finally, you can't forget conflict. So we get the little boxing gloves here. How are you going to handle conflict? And, some people just don't want to deal with conflict. They're not conflict people. They don't like getting into that dark tunnel of conflict. And other people are like, well, how do you resolve things unless you hit it head on and, get it right out there on the table and hash it out. And, maybe voices are raised, but at the end, everybody's friends, hopefully. And so you get this whole box thing going on here of all of our hopes, all of our dreams, all of our desires. And one of the things that we need to realize is that a lot of this is impacted and defined by us in our younger years, in our childhood. Not to say that some of it can't be influenced by peers, by friends, by even at school, but most of it comes from our experience in our individual families. What I tell people when I do premarital counseling, I always tell them, I said, I know you guys are in love, and people say love is blind, but honestly, I believe love is deaf. Because we really don't hear what the other person's saying, because in what they're saying, they're talking about their hopes, dreams, and desires, and sometimes they might be giving you things that are red flags, but you're like deaf to it. Right? And a lot of times, those things are coming from childhood because most of our hopes, dreams, and desires come from either recreating or avoiding something that we grew up with. So we might have had a home environment that we really, it was great. Mom and dad were awesome, very loving, respectful of one another. And we're like, I want to emulate that. That's the kind of relationship I want to have. We might have a situation where we came out of a very dysfunctional home and we're like, no, I do not want to replicate that at all. As a matter of fact, we end up saying things like, I will never be like, right? And you can put in a blank right there. And sometimes that can become a bitter root expectation because we sometimes, become what we don't want to become. And sometimes what we judge, Paul says in Romans chapter 2, be careful what you judge because in some ways you end up becoming just like that. It always amazes me how like a person growing up in an alcoholic home will get into a relationship with an alcoholic. And you say, well, how can that be? And that's because, well, they probably never got love from that figure. And so they're looking for love from a type of person like that. And so they they replicate something. In that case, replicating something negative. And so it becomes impactful, and it becomes a hope and a dream and a desire that we have. Now, here's the thing. We put all of these things in the box. We got all of our hopes, our dreams, and our desires, and we put them in the box. And everyone's got one, and you might have some things in here that these are a little bit more common to everybody, a little bit more germane to everybody, but you might have some that are very unique to you. We put all of these in our box, and what we do is we get into a relationship, and we say, here. We look at the other person, and we say, I'm looking at you to fulfill this. I want you to help me. Hey, my dreams, hopes, and desires, I'm handing them off to you. And when we do that, we don't realize that what the other person is actually getting is a box load of expectations. This is what I expect from you. And that can become a heavy weight. And now you're getting into a relationship, and the other person, like, you're handing them a box. Well, these are just my dreams. These are just, what I envision. This is my happy place. But the other person is like, I just got all of these expectations placed on me and placed on my life on how I'm going to try to, fulfill these in your life. And so an expectation is a strong belief that something is going to happen now or shortly thereafter. And so this is an expectation. I'm believing that this is going to be fulfilled by you. I'm believing that you're going to help me with all of these things in my life. I want you to make these things come true. And it can be very, very difficult for the other person to have to deal with that. And sometimes you hear people in their relationship and they're dealing with this stuff, and they'll be like, but he's changing a little bit, or she'll change. They'll get there. And listen, red flag when you think another person has to change. Huge red flag. Because how easy is it for people to change? Right? We can't even change ourselves most of the time. And we think we're going to change somebody else. We think we're going to impact somebody else. And so it becomes really difficult. I think of that song, it's a modern song on the pop radio, When You and I Collide. I don't know if you've ever heard that song, but basically it's talking about this. When my worldview and your worldview collide, and I tell people in premarital counseling, I say, you're not marrying another person. You're marrying another history. You're marrying a family. You are not just trying to bring two people together at an altar. You're trying to bring two histories together, two families together. And that's difficult. That can be, that can be bigger than any of us would ever think. And so what happens is they stand at the altar and say, as long as we live, I'm committed to you. This is wonderful. And what you don't see is that they're handing each other these great big imaginary boxes of hopes, dreams, and desires that the other person is saying, wow, this is a weight of expectations that you're thinking that I can fulfill in you, and that's going to be hard. And so what happens is when we start, when the dust kind of settles and we're into marriage, and these hopes and dreams and desires are becoming expectations, and things are starting to happen, then what happens is we have 4 ways of dealing with the collision of these expectations. In some cases, maybe even unrealistic expectations. Because if there's a hole in somebody's heart that wasn't filled when they were children, they didn't get it from their parents, then going into a relationship, that's an unrealistic expectation to believe that somebody else is going to fill a longing hole in somebody's heart. And so what happens is there's 4 ways that we really begin to deal with that. And the first one is if we're passive aggressive, we leave. If we're passive aggressive, we just kind of lay back and say, I'm not going to engage in a change process. I'm not going to engage in counseling. I'm not going to engage in coaching. I don't want help. I'm done. I didn't sign up for this. I'm just going to leave. This isn't working out. You've changed. I'm not doing this. I can't take the pressure anymore. And you just leave. And unfortunately, here's what happens when you leave. You take your box out of the relationship, and you just go looking around for somebody else to dump that box on. You haven't dealt with the box. You haven't dealt with your behavior or attitudes towards the box or anyone else's box. You just take it and leave, and you're going to be looking for the next relationship. And that's why they say second marriages are twice as hard, and third marriages are 3 times as hard, because nothing's changing. You're just bringing all these expectations into that next relationship, and it becomes difficult. So if you're passive aggressive, sometimes the answer is, I'm just going to leave. If you're aggressive, sometimes the answer is going to be, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I will win this out. And sometimes we win by the 4 C's, and that's convince. I'm going to convince, sweetheart, I love you. You're the light of my life. But my box is more realistic than your box. And we start convincing. We start, this is kind of subtle, but I'm going to win this. I'm being aggressive, but I'm going to win this. I'm just going to convince you over time. I'm going to keep chipping away, and I'm going to convince you that my box is better, my box is good. Not that yours is bad, it's just that mine's better, and we're going to convince. The other way is we're going to convict. And this is much different than convincing. This is, I'm going to put guilt on you. I'm going to guilt you because your box is wrong. My box is better. Your ideas are dumb. And now it becomes a little bit more hostile. And here's what happens when we go down the we're going to win course. Only the winner is happy. Right? The loser's never happy because they know they're losing ground. You might think, I won that. Yeah, you won a battle and you're losing a war, right? You might be happy. The other C is control. I'm going to control that person. I'm going to control that. I'll get emotionally, I'm going to get a higher edge emotionally, and I'm going to start manipulating, and I'm going to start using emotions. I'll use blame. And here's the big thing. I'll use punish and reward. I'm going to introduce a punish and reward situation. That, you do it my way, and I'm going to reward you. You don't do it my way, and I'm going to start punishing you. And this starts getting dicey. Now, this starts becoming, really big problems in a marriage, in a relationship, in a situation. And the last one is coerce. I'm just going to coerce you. I'm just going to, make you understand that if you live like me, this will work. That's all you got to do is get on board. Just give up your box, embrace my box, and everything is going to work out. That's going to get better. So this is being aggressive. I'm going to win. Passive aggressive, I'm done. Aggressive, I'm going to win. I'm going to make you submit to my way. Passive person, they're going to conform. They're going to conform. Hey, whatever you want. I'm passive. I'm not argumentative. I'm just going to conform. I'll just give in, and that's I want to become what the other person wants me to be. And so, and to a degree, this is a good thing, but to a higher degree, it's a bad thing, because here's what happens when somebody just conforms, is that tension may leave for a while. But after a while, both of you start losing respect for each other because you understand what's going on. You conform. Another way for a passive person is, I'll compromise. I'm just going to compromise. I want this thing to work, and so this is how you settle. This is how you stay married. You want to be married, you want to stay married, you're going to compromise. And there's truth to that, right? Compromise can be a good thing. You got to be diplomatic in relationships. There is a give and take. But when somebody starts compromising to the point of losing their hopes, dreams, and desires, losing their own identity, then that becomes, again, a really bad thing. And here's the problem with compromise, is that compromise fuels the wrong thing. Compromise fuels the wrong thing. You've heard people say, well, I'm committed to my relationship. I'm committed. I'm committed to my marriage. And you know what? That's great. And that's wonderful. But here's the truth. No one is married to a marriage. Right? You don't date a relationship. You date another person. There's another person involved in interpersonal relationships. And so you can't just say, well, I'm committed to my marriage. Well, that's fine, but you didn't marry a marriage. There's another individual in there. There's another human being in there, and you're married to that person. You didn't marry, you don't date a relationship, you don't marry a marriage. You're in a relationship, you're in a marriage with another living human being. And so compromise sometimes fuels the wrong thing and doesn't necessarily get you in a direction that you want to go in. And so it might be good, but it's not best, and it's not going to be fulfilling in the long run. But there is another option. There is another option. And that is what happy couples understand. In life, you just see these people that are happy. And you say, is it because they just married the perfect person? I mean, why are they so happy? And sometimes it's an enigma. Why are those people so happy? There's another option of what happy people know, and we're going to talk about that next week. So next week, we're actually going to look at more scripture. This week, we're just kind of setting the ground. I don't have a lot of scripture in this. We're just kind of laying the foundation. But for the next 3 weeks, we are going to talk about what happy couples know and the other options that are out there. And so we don't want a debt-debtor relationship. We don't want to enter a relationship where we're wheeling and dealing. I did my part, you owe me. Hey, I did the laundry, you owe me to clean the car. And we start getting into a nitpicking thing like that, and we start, owing one another stuff out of our imaginary box. I'm handling the money pretty well, so you owe me this vacation. Or we had the kids that you wanted, and so now I want the vehicle that I want. So we start getting into this thing, I did my part, you owe me, from all the stuff that's in the box. And we want to be careful, because here's the thing. If we get into a debt-debtor type of relationship with anybody, but especially in a marriage, right? How much gratitude do you express to people who pay you what they owe you? Nothing, right? So if we're in a debt-debtor relationship, I owe you, you owe me, we're keeping track, I've got score, then what happens is there's no gratitude in the relationship. There's no gratitude in the relationship. Hey, I cooked you breakfast. Yeah, you need to, right? So if somebody owed me $100, if I lent somebody $100, and then 2 weeks later they come up to me and they say, hey, Pastor, here's your $100 back. I'm not oh, that's so kind of you. Wow, I'm floored. That's awesome. No, it's just yeah, you owed it to me. Unless you really owe it to a person with bad character, and then you're amazed that you got it back. But so that's the whole deal. You don't express a lot of gratitude when somebody owes you something, and we rarely express gratitude for what we've come to expect. And so now catch this, because in a marriage, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years, 30, 40 years, Mike and Esther. If we've come to expect things, we lose the awe and wonder and appreciation of the other human being's part in the relationship and what they're really doing. Because all relationships have roles, right? There's roles. That's just the way it works. And when we start to expect the other person's part in that relationship, we just lose gratitude. And we can even become ungrateful. We can become ungrateful. But gratitude is that part of us that always says, wow, I didn't expect that. Well, I didn't expect that. That's nice. Wow, I didn't expect that. And so that's where we want to live. That's where we want to camp. This is one of the things that happy people know, is to always be filled with gratitude that, my shirts got ironed. Wow, that's awesome. That's not your role to do. I really appreciate that. I cut all the grass, or I painted the house, or whatever it might be. And there's a wow factor. Wow, that's really awesome. I really appreciate that, because a debt-debtor relationship does away with unconditional love. I'm not loving a person now because of what they're contributing and what they're offering. I'm just expecting it. It's a debt. You owe me this. And it's hard to love somebody that you just think is paying a debt. Or if it's something we expect. It's our anniversary. You did not give me flowers. right? You were expecting something rather than, wow, thank you. I've given you flowers 30 years in a row, but wow, thank you. This is so awesome. I really, really appreciate this. So love doesn't do well in an environment of expectations. When we think that this is stuff expected from me. I understand you got a box of dreams, hopes, and desires. I got a box of hopes, dreams, and desires. But if they're expectations, then gratitude doesn't flourish in that kind of environment when we have a box full of, because here's what happens. I can never do enough because you're always expecting more. Right? If they're expectations, I can never do enough. You're always going to be expecting more. And so the question becomes, what do we do with our hopes and our dreams and our desires? Because let's face it, we all have hopes and dreams and desires. You can't go into a marriage relationship and say, I don't got any hopes, dreams, or desires. I don't care if we have money. We can live in a tent for all I care. I don't care. It's like, if that's the situation, then ladies, run. Don't marry that person, right? This is why I say love is deaf. Because when you're dating, a lot of times you know what you're doing, and especially as you're starting to get more serious, like, where's this going? Then you start talking about hopes, dreams, and desires. And you really need to be listening to what the other person's saying. Because, there may be some things that are huge red flags. We were at the men's retreat yesterday, and it was beautiful. It's the first time I'd been up there. It's a beautiful camp up in Lovell, Maine on a lake, just gorgeous. And they have these docks out there. I'm sure in the summer it's a hopping place. They do a lot of things with boys and stuff there and married couples. But they have this dock system, and then they have this buoy system where you can see it's like a big area for people to swim. And then beyond that, they have 2 no boating floats. And so I was just like in a little screen area, a little porch. And I don't know, Dave, were you there in that porch at that time? So all of a sudden, here comes 2 fishermen. And they're fishing, and they're casting into the swimming area. And so the caretaker of the property's there, and he goes, hey, have you ever taken a grapple hook out of a kid's heel? He's like, what's your problem? That was the response, like, what's your problem? He goes, my problem is you're inside a no boating area, and you're fishing in a swimming area. And the guy goes, oh, yeah, that's a real problem. And he just casts again. And then he starts swearing. Because the guy said, well, I'll call the cops. And then he started, dropping the F-bombs, and he's going off. And I thought, gee, I'll bet you his wife is so proud to be in a relationship with somebody like that, right? That's why love is deaf. It's like, okay, this guy is a class A jerk, and I feel so sorry for whoever's married to that attitude. Because that was like horrible. As a matter of fact, I wanted to open the door and start getting into it, and I thought, yeah, you're a pastor, and people reflect on that. And, somebody, I don't even know who it was, just recently somebody saw me at a traffic stop, and I said something to another car, and they said, hey, you're a pastor. And I was like, don't know who you are, but I guess you're my conscience. And I was like, yeah, did you just see what that other car just did? But, that's your... Anyways, so here's the thing. We know we owe the other person in the relationship everything, but we don't necessarily expect everything in return. And that keeps the wow factor. That keeps the appreciation factor. That keeps the gratitude there. And this is what happy couples know. And here's the thing. It doesn't even make sense. Because our first thought is, well, you want me to be a doormat? And no, that's not what we're talking about at all. It doesn't make sense. It's just having this attitude of appreciation and really respecting what the other person's doing. And here's where it boils down, because I will throw a scripture out there right now. This is what it boils down to. Let's get this first. What does the other person actually owe you? And you know what the answer is? Nothing. They don't owe you anything. If they want to do things, they're doing it out of appreciation, out of respect, out of love, but they don't owe you anything. So that's number one. That's the wrong way of looking at a relationship. You owe me. I have expectations. I expect you to do something. You owe me. No, they don't owe you anything. They don't. But in a relationship, when there is that give and take and that sharing and that mutual responsibility of what's going on, then there's a gratitude factor. There's a wow factor. There's a thank you. I appreciate you so much because look at all the things that you do for me constantly, and it's got to be both ways, right? It's got to be a shared thing. And so here's what Jesus said about that. As I have loved you, love one another. Now listen, we all know the golden rule. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. This is higher. This isn't a doing unto others as you want them to do to you. This is Jesus saying, as I've loved you, I want you to love one another in the exact same way that I loved you. And then Paul fleshes that out even a little bit more in Ephesians 5, verse 2. He says, and walk in love. And they're like, well, we get that, Paul. We're supposed to walk in love. Just as Christ loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. Wow. Wow. Do you know this morning that God doesn't expect your worship of him? God doesn't demand your worship of him. When you worship him, he loves that. It's like, wow. Because you don't have to do that, right? We don't have to worship God. We don't have to do anything. We're free will moral agents. But when we do it of our own volition, that's the whole thing about the fall. And why did we go through this thing called the fall? And why have we fallen from God and God's redeemed us? Because when we recognize that we're redeemed, there's a wow factor. There's I want to worship you. I want to be thankful. And God is like, that is so awesome. I want you to want me out of your choice, not manipulation, not coercion, not convicting, not threatening, not anything. I want you to just love me. And so, sometimes people think that, it sounds like losing. If I don't expect something from the other person, it sounds like losing, but it's not. And it sounds like a paradox and it sounds strange, but it's what happy couples have come to know because it works. It simply works. And so I want to end today by leaving you two questions that, I just want you to contemplate. I want you to think about that. And this is number one. What is in your box? Because you need to think about that, and you need to think about that deeply. What is your dreams? What's your desires? What are your hopes? What is inside of your box? You need to figure that out because it's an unseen engine that drives a lot of your life. It's kind of like behind the scenes, just fueling how you view life and what you're expecting out of life. So what's in your box, number one? And the other one is are you expecting someone else to fulfill those for you? Are you handing that off to somebody and saying, I expect you to answer these questions and to fulfill these dreams and these hopes and these desires? Because again, a lot of times that can really be unrealistic expectations if you're true and if you're honest. There are certain things that we need as being created in the image of God that another human being cannot meet. That's why our relationship with God, our relationship with Jesus Christ is so important, because there are parts of our makeup that only God can meet the expectations. Only God can fulfill certain aspects, and that's why I think it's in Colossians 2:10 that Paul says, in him you are complete. He's the one that completes you. He's the one that fills those voids. He's the one that fills those hurts. He's the one that, makes you a complete person. And that's what happy people know, because they're both completed in their relationship with God. And they're releasing one another from totally unrealistic expectations. And they realize that other person really, honestly, they don't owe me anything. And so when they do what they do in the relationship, and when they bring what they bring into the relationship, well, it's a wow factor. Now there's gratitude. Now there's appreciation. Now there's value. And so have you handed your box off to somebody else? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for marriage. We live in a time and an age right now where man has done everything in his power to cheapen and devalue marriage. But we know that marriage did not come from the mind or heart of God. It came from man, rather. It came from you. That you are the designer. You are the author. You are the one that did that first wedding ceremony in the garden so many years ago. It's your genius. It's your desire that we learn unconditional love by being completed in a marriage relationship and in all of our other relationships. And Father, help us to learn the tricks of the trade, as it were. Help us to learn the dynamics. Help us to learn that we can be the best in relationships, that we have something to bring rather than something only to take. And help us as we go through these next few weeks to really lay foundations that bless us, bless our spouses, bless other people in our relationships. And by doing so, we can bless you. And we thank you for all of these things through you who loved us so much that you gave your only begotten Son, that as we believe in him, we don't perish. And that's not only just perishing by going to hell, but that's also perishing in aspects of our life that you want us to enjoy and be enriched in. That we won't perish in our relationships, but you will flood us with the life that Jesus came to bring. As he said, I come to give you life and life more abundantly. So we thank you for all of these things in Jesus' name. And everyone said amen and amen and amen. God bless you. Stay tuned for part 2 next week and have a wonderful week in Jesus.